Have you ever heard of a civilization so powerful, so ambitious, that people thought their buildings had to have been made by giants? Well, today we're digging into the incredible engineering of Mycenaean Greece to uncover the real story behind their legendary stone monuments. When the ancient Greeks, centuries later, looked at the massive walls of Mycenae, they just couldn't wrap their heads around it. How could mere mortals build something like that? Their best guess? It had to be the Cyclops, those mythical one-eyed giants. And hey, it's a fantastic story. But the truth? Well, the truth is even more impressive.
Okay, so to really get how these fortresses came to be, we first have to know who was behind them. So let's meet the Mycenaeans.
Picture this. It's around 1600 BC, during the late Bronze Age. The Mycenaeans just explode onto the scene and become the dominant force on mainland Greece. They were this military and trading powerhouse, so powerful in fact that they eventually overtook the super sophisticated Minoan civilization over on the island of Crete.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because you can literally see the difference in how they saw the world just by looking at what they built. While the Minoans were famous for these sprawling, open, unfortified palaces, the Mycenaeans, they built for war. Their whole culture was centered around these immense, heavily fortified citadels, all designed to protect their kings and, of course, their treasure. So keeping that in mind, let's take a walk. We're heading for the main entrance of their greatest citadel, the legendary city of Mycenae itself. I mean, just the walls alone are mind-blowing. They were built using these enormous, roughly cut boulders. Some of them weighed up to 6 tons. To put that in perspective, that's about the weight of a full-grown elephant, all hoisted into place with incredible precision. This style was so incredible, so awe-inspiring, that it actually earned its own name, Cyclopean masonry. You can totally see why later Greeks thought only giants could pull this off, right? But just think about the level of human organization this required. Quarrying the stone, hauling it, lifting it, all without any modern machines. It just screams that this was a highly structured society with a ton of centralized power. And right in the middle of these imposing walls, you've got the main way in, the famous Lion Gate. This was said to be the gateway to the palace of the legendary king Agamemnon himself. Now, the gate itself is just a masterpiece of engineering. It's about 10 feet wide, 10 feet high, but look closer. See that triangular piece right above the main lintel stone? That's the secret sauce. It's called a relieving triangle, and it's this brilliant innovation that pushes the crushing weight of the wall away from the opening. It's what keeps that huge stone beam from cracking under all that pressure. So what's amazing is the Mycenaeans didn't just solve an engineering problem, they turned it into a canvas. They carved 2 lions standing on either side of a column, and in doing so, they created the very first piece of monumental sculpture known in mainland Europe. This wasn't just a doorway, it was a huge statement of artistic skill and royal power. All right, let's shift gears. We're going to go from the world of the living to the world of the dead and see how they used the same monumental style to honor their kings. The Mycenaeans had really specific ideas about what happens after you die. Unlike the later Greeks, who mostly practiced cremation, the Mycenaeans buried their dead. And when it came to their kings and queens, they did it with a whole lot of ceremony. See, they believed that a king's journey into the underworld was a big deal, and he'd need supplies. So he'd be buried with his best weapons, along with plenty of food and drink, all to make sure his status and his comfort were guaranteed in the next life. And we're not talking about a simple grave here, not even close. Royalty was buried in these spectacular structures called thalos tombs. Just imagine these huge, stone, beehive-shaped rooms built right into the side of a hill. They were massive symbols of a king's wealth and power. The most famous one is called the Treasury of Atreus. Actually, going into one of these tombs is a whole architectural experience. First, you walk down this long, open-air hallway called a dromos, which is carved right out of the ground. That leads you to the doorway of the main chamber, the tholos itself, a vast domed room built with these perfectly placed layers of stone, each one jutting out just a little bit over the one below it to create that perfect soaring beehive shape. So let's just pull back for a second and think about what all of this, from the citadels to the tombs, what it all really tell us about who the Mycenaeans were. So let's circle back to that question we started with. Was it giants? No way.
What we're looking at is the product of incredible human ingenuity, the organized power of a complex civilization, and just pure, raw ambition. I think the main thing to take away from this is that their architecture was never just about function. It didn't matter if it was a wall built for defense or a tomb built for the afterlife. Every single one of those massive stones was put there to express power, to project authority, and to honor their deepest beliefs about life, death, and everything in between.
And that really leaves us with one final big thought, doesn't it? The Mycenaean civilization, for all its power, eventually just collapsed. Its language, its culture, it all faded into history. But their monuments, literally etched into the landscape of Greece, they're still here. So you have to wonder, if these stones could talk, what other stories of kings and battles and forgotten beliefs are they still waiting to tell us?